Now for our Platinum sponsor presentation for this morning, RXP Services. RXP will be talking about the digital enterprise and how delivering customer value is closer than it may appear. We'll be joined on stage by our two presenters, Grant Doucette and Craig Bailey. Grant has spent over 15 years developing leading-edge integration solutions for enterprise clients. He spent the last 8 years building businesses around the best practices of integration and the simple ways technology can be used to deliver customer value. He's worked for organisations around the world through the US, Europe and Asia. Recently, Grant and his team have been pioneering the use of CA-LISA service virtualisation. This has seen the market identify the need to virtualise complex environments and transactions to improve the quality of end-to-end integration solutions. We'll also have Craig join us, who is a principal consultant within the integration practice of RXP. Prior to moving to Australia, he spent 7 years working at Telecom New Zealand as an integration architect and delivery leader, where he evangelised the use of service virtualisation and other DevOps practices. Before that, Craig held application development and consulting roles in the UK across multiple industries. Craig has spent most of his 16 years in technology delivering working environments and systems integration. In his previous life, Craig worked as an astrophysics researcher, spending time operating radio telescopes in the Arctic Circle in 2-metre snowdrifts, which persuaded him to move into the land of IT. So on that note, please join me in welcoming Grant and Craig to the stage.
Now, before I get too far, can you all hear me? I'm just learning from the previous presentation. I've managed to turn my microphone on. Thank you for that introduction, Dan. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak to all of you today about our view of integration, the digital enterprise, what that means as a concept and as a thought process, and then how we're looking to take DevOps as a service out to the marketplace to make integration as easy as we feel that it is. But before I get started on me, Dan gave me as much of an introduction on myself as I could possibly do, so I'm glad I don't have a slide about us, actually. Just talk to you a bit about RXP. So we're a publicly listed company that started about 3 years ago now, at 2011. We started with 4 people and bought the company that I was a part of, which was Vanguard Integration. So we've been part of the RXP group now for about 3 years, delivering integration to Tier 1 and other parties over the last few years. Right now we're an organisation that's about 430 people, probably 450 by the time I stop talking if Wayne's in the room. He was here earlier. And a market capitalisation, it says 80. Based upon our share price today, it's nearly $100 million market capitalisation. So we're definitely growing. We've doubled in size year on year over the last 3 years. So this is just in case you haven't heard about who we are and what we stand for. Just thought that I would mention this to you. We build a capability in digital around 4 key practices, which I'll go into in a little bit more detail shortly, around web and mobile development, analytics, information, business intelligence, integration, which is the area that I manage for the country, and infrastructure and cloud, so we're talking AWS as well as Microsoft and other platforms that we manage as a service as well. Talking about the integration practice, we have about 300, you have to excuse me, I'm from Melbourne and the air is too nice up here. We have about 300 years of integration experience in the organisation. Between Craig and I, we'll talk later, we have about 30 years ourselves. Our objective is not to get to the smallest or to the most amount of money at the most amount of profit, and hopefully my CEO's not in here, but I think that's right. But it's about creating strategic value for our clients. At integration being the core of what we believe, but also the movement of data between systems and consumers, we can't afford to be putting ourselves in a situation where we're not trying to think strategic and long term. So that's where, as Mark mentioned before, with our arrangement as integration strategic partner with super partners, we're always trying to think about the ways that we can make things easier or get to market faster. So moving into the digital enterprise. So it might be a term people are familiar with or have heard of. Our take on it is that it's an always on, always connected, always needing to be relevant, always needing to take different data to different people to gain market share. And in this day and age of, I think we heard it earlier today, the Internet of Things, moving to the Internet of Everything, there's devices everywhere, we're really trying to enable organisations to choose what they need to do to get that market interested in what they have to offer. You know, if you're a clothes manufacturer in Mossman today, you can be selling your product to Canada, to Alaska, it doesn't matter, and you can get there right now. You can get there tomorrow, you can get there whenever you like, but you couldn't have done that 30 or 40 years ago. The opportunity for change and the opportunity for growth is now faster than it ever was. So we're also going to talk about the challenges, and I've mentioned a few already, but we're going to delve into that a bit more, and then talk about how we view that integration meets those challenges. So you've probably seen this picture on every internet or digital slide set that's probably ever been produced. On the left-hand side was 5 or 6, or probably about 8 years ago, and on the right-hand side was a year or so ago at important events, you know. So we've got one guy down in the corner on the left-hand side who's got his flip-out phone, and by the time we've got to now, they're everywhere. It's a little bit of a cliche, this picture, but it demonstrates what I think we all know. I've got 3 devices with me today, so we're always trying to stay connected. And those connections have to go somewhere, and the things that they're connecting to have to be systems that have data that's relevant to the people who are looking to use it. It's not just enough to connect systems to systems, and it's not just enough to say, well, we've got a web presence. You've actually got to make it relevant in a distracted market. It is a situation now where, you know, perhaps Coca-Cola 100 years ago had 30 years of competitive advantage. Nowadays you have, I don't know, 2 weeks, 6 months, if you're really fortunate, if you've patented well, or someone could launch tomorrow and take it away with something that's slightly different or slightly better. Mark mentioned it in his speech as well, the Gartner PACE methodology, which is something that I think resonates with the way we view the world as well. You've got systems of record. So this is where integration has traditionally been, moving data between the systems in your environment. I've got my customer, I've got my financial, I've got my ERP. We want to move data between it. Well, that's integration, it's EAI, but it's not digital. So what we want to do is take perhaps even slices of that data, and it might be get member balance to use superannuation as well. It might be get member balance, which is one field in one database table in one system, and we want to make that available through a channel, through another way of communicating with our stakeholder, it's our consumer, and we want to give it to them in a relevant fashion, fast, always connected. It has to work the first time that you load it up. If the app does the little spinny thing for 5 minutes, we'll shut it down. We'll go and get another app. So we're very, very discerning these days. And what it's interesting about IT, so I started in IT nearly 20 years ago, and it was all computers and it's all logics and it's all 1 and 0, and basically I imagine most people in this room will understand that it's all very yes or no. And yet these days we personalise our phone, we personalise our tablet, we personalise our laptop. We're trying to take technology and turn it into a people thing. We're trying to turn it into something that describes us. And what we're really doing there is defining our behaviour in a technological way. And the organisations that meet that personalisation but give the relevant of data behind it that actually connects that all together are the ones who we remember. I went for a run this morning, I've got my run keeper on my phone, and I can see what my 6 other friends are doing on their phone, right? So I know I'm connected with my group, even though I was doing something quite personal. And just being able to acknowledge somebody else's achievement is a behavioural change through technology. And what we really see in our space is integration being not only the behind-the-scenes black box that you might kick every time it's a little bit slow, but actually being the thing that enables you to have that discussion of what information do I want to take to my customer today? How do I want them to interact with me today? And this will become all very relevant in the conversation around DevOps that we'll talk about in a little bit, because as Mark said before, you've got to build trust. So if I'm a businessman and I've got an idea, and we'll go through my next latest and greatest idea in a couple of minutes, but if I've got a business idea, I don't want IT telling me it's too hard. I'm happy for the CEO to tell me it's too hard. I'm happy for product to say that's a silly idea, but I don't want IT to tell me it's too hard. I don't want to take 6 months to develop it, and I shouldn't have to in this day and age of cloud, of service enablement, of data provision, one-touch, AWS. You shouldn't be waiting 6 months for something. You should be able to do something now that you trust, that works, that you can define. So in our integration practice, we'll help you define what those services look like, what your data looks like, what your process flow, your workflow looks like. And integration's kind of the tension between data and process. You know, it's like a 50-50 split. You can get the data right, but if you haven't got your process right, then no one will stay waiting for that spinny thing to stop. But if you've got your process right and you've got the wrong data coming through, then people go, well, that was great, but that didn't tell me anything. So at RXP, we've coined a phrase, RXP Digital, to indicate how we go to market. And in the old world, around that systems of record conversation, we had siloed departments. So if I was in finance, I had my finance systems. If I'm in HR, I have my HR systems. If I want HR to talk to finance, I'll fill in a memo, I'll run it around the room, and I'll hand it in. Or I might build my integrations and their integrations, and we both might have a get person. So what we're saying now is in most spaces now, we have customization of services where we can all get the same information from a different level. And this is one my strategic GM really likes. So it's the difference between SMAC and ACID. So in digital phrasing over the last few years, SMAC is social, mobile, analytics, and cloud. Well, our flavour is ACID. So analytics, cloud, integration, and development. So what we're really saying there is the social and mobile opportunities will always be there, but we're underpinning those with the services that we go to market with. And then let's bring it down from those high-level thoughts down to integration. So take relevant data that is currently inside the wall, inside your firewall, inside your enterprise, that's yours, you've got it, you've kept it, you've managed it for years, and identifying how you're going to monetize it, how you're going to take it out, how it's suddenly going to connect to systems for you. As I talked about before, the tension between data and process, integration's about unlocking that potential and getting you to think about what if, what's next, what could we do, what do we have? But also, as I mentioned with the digital scenario, we need to act quickly. So we've got to have speed to market. We've got to be able to leverage our ideas, got to be innovative, got to be different, we've got to be new. But it has to work. There's no point being fast if it breaks. And it's what Mark was sort of alluding to earlier before. And there's an interesting stat as well around integration as a development cost for new channels. 70% of all work is about the integration between the systems that you have, you trust, or you might be building, and about getting it out through the channel. So I look at that and I say, two things. First thing, great, 70%, looks like I've got work for a while. But what I would prefer is, I wouldn't say necessarily that number drops, but that the pie grows. And what I'm saying there is that the total amount of effort involved in a project, the integration effort goes down, but the total ideas go up, so there's still a net about the same amount. But what we're trying to do there is recognize integration is hard, it's understood by a few people, we deliver it well, we deliver it agilely when we need to. Most of the time is the case now, we need to deliver it in an agile fashion, we've developed methodologies for that. So we're about reducing complexity in change and delivery, but also about saying, well, what can we add to our mixture to enable us to deliver solutions that are more intuitive and innovative for our clients, that are less risky. So just a way of presenting that. So the business have ideas, integration's going to be a part of it, there's going to be some application development, there's going to be some infrastructure, but there's also going to be some DevOps behind that. There's going to be the management of change. There's going to be the supporting of that environment. There's going to be the growing of trust in that environment. Integration environments are hard to change. Mark said that before. It's a high contention environment. So we need to reduce that contention through the concept of DevOps to liberate the value that's already sitting in your environment, that's already sitting there that you haven't unlocked yet. It looks better when Craig spins them. So what we've said is we're going to go to market with DevOps as a service. So we talked before, Mark mentioned before that there's a 6-week value pack for the CA delivery of their environment. And I look at that and I say, what I want to use for those 6 weeks is the right advice to get me the right solution I want. I don't want to be setting up an environment. Environment should already be set up. It's not that hard. It should be about liberating the value of the knowledgeable people within CA, the knowledgeable people within RXP, not about how many things have been installed. So what we're saying is we want to take months from the time you just think of a change to the time that you've delivered it, down to minutes. And we think it's possible. In fact, we know it's possible because we're already doing it. Right? So months down to weeks, get the ideas going, get the juices flowing. Down to minutes, I've got an idea, I need a new environment, I want to start embracing this idea, I want to develop it. Craig's going to go into a little bit of detail about a demonstration, but the phrase that I want you to understand today, and I'm hoping that it's coming through, is change is inevitable, it's coming. We need to act quickly, but we need to act quickly with quality. That quality doesn't have to take time. It just has to be something that you thread into everything that you do. And now all the gears come together and show you how it all has to work together to make it work. So I'll bring Craig up now to slowly take over from me, but let's put it to an example. So I have my U-Butte greatest idea. I mean, I can look at it. Look, you're all very excited by this. I can tell the market we're ready to engage. Look at this. It's got a collar. No one's ever thought of that before. And I want to release this next week. And what I want to have behind it is an app where you may be able to take your own photo and see yourself in this. It's powerful, isn't it? Seeing yourself in this. It can't be that hard, Craig. I've just got the idea, mate. Make it happen.
Okay, am I on? That's good. Okay, so I'm going to do something now that you're not going to like.
Come on, I want my stuff. Come on. Where's my app? Come on.
Waiting sucks, doesn't it? It really does. How many of you started looking at your phone then? Come on, don't be shy. How many of you looked at the phone because I was having a drink of water and didn't give you the answer you wanted? 2 or 3, 4 or 5? Don't worry, you don't have to answer. Okay. So that's a pretty big challenge you've given me there, Grant.
1 week, Craig. 1 week.
1 week. Okay. So I've got a short deadline. I'm used to that. And integration's on the critical path, because as we've said, integration is pretty much at the heart of the digital economy and API development. And unfortunately, Grant, those environments are already contended, and they've already been booked by other projects. So I'm going to have to do something new.
I'm off getting a drink. 1 week, Craig. I need it next week.
Okay. What do I do to fix the problem? Well, I've got a little app I've got to build. I've got a bunch of services. They happen to already exist, pretty much. So it isn't that hard. I just need to find a way to unlock what I already have. But boom. If I need to create a new environment and get all of those different teams working together, set everything up, how long do you think it's going to take to get all of that working? Environment provisioning, extra licenses, software installation, database setup, test data setup. The list goes on and on and on. And I've worked in Telecom New Zealand for the past 7 years. Before that, I worked for a large fleet logistics company in the UK. Before that, I worked for a service provider in space, defense, and government. I can tell you in my experience, if anybody in this room says less than a couple of weeks, then you should come and work for us first. But realistically, you're talking 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 3 months. Depends on your procurement process. Depends how big you are as an organization. So we need to get around that problem somehow. DevOps. It's a topic I love. It's a often poorly defined phrase. What do you mean by DevOps? Is it just moving development and operations teams together to add value? Does it mean a little something more? You know, when you try and roll out DevOps, you have a lot of choices. You know, there are software, code management, release management, service virtualization options on the market from major vendors. There are open source opportunities. You've got a lot to think about. You've got to make all that stuff work together. And the problem with DevOps is it can be a little bit of a primitive approach. It can be a little bit like playing whack-a-mole. By the way, my daughter drew this. I actually drew the original one. And when she was looking over my shoulder at the weekend about, I think Saturday afternoon, she said that my caveman looked like a Swiss cheese with sticks. And I says, well, go on, you do something better then. So she drew this. Now, she's actually a much better artist than this. And she charged me $10 for it.
It's a good service.
And because I know she's a lot better artist than this, I said to her, well, you know, that's not really your best work. So she said, yeah, but you didn't give me very long, and I was doing something else. And that was so interesting to me that it resonated with the very problem that I'm trying to talk about, that I handed over the $10 and she left very quickly. So what do we want to do? We want to move away from this whacking a problem in delivery with a new tool and another new tool and another new tool to start focusing on what's really important in DevOps, which is about building a virtuous cycle of continuous improvement. Getting things moving. So what do you need for DevOps as a service? Well, if you're going as a service, you're going on the cloud. That's what you have to have. You need infrastructure. You need to resolve all of those provisioning issues. That is where a bulk of the problems are. If you don't have the ability to spin up environments, databases, storage quickly, then you're not going to get anywhere. It doesn't matter what tools you have, your baseline isn't there. So you need to have something as a baseline that everything else sits upon. You need infrastructure as a service. What else do you need? Service virtualization. It just closes so many gaps, you know? You still need to be able to provision it quickly and repeatedly. It's no good having service virtualization if you go through a long procurement process every time you want to, you know, buy a new dev pack, etc. You need to be able to get up and running quickly. So it sits on top of your infrastructure as a service. And now comes in the integration bit, you know, the bit that I've spent 16 years of my life loving and hating. Getting everything connected together. Connectivity is great. And do you know what's wonderful as an integration person? After spending 15, 16 years kind of sat in the back office, you're always on the last person to deliver, and everybody says, oh yeah, integration's always a pain because integration testing takes so long. It's great that we're actually right in the middle of the new economy. If you want to be agile, if you want to be able to deliver quickly, then again, having an integration platform available as a service sat on top of a cloud offering is critical. It doesn't mean that on-premise integration isn't important. What I'm talking about here is the ability to do hybrid integration. They'll be able to spin up on the cloud, rapidly do development, and if you then want to come on-premises, you can. So you need an offering that supports that. And finally, automation. Because automation is where you get a lot of your value. Your ability to start building continuous integration, continuous regression testing. True story, recently speaking to a client, they want to do an upgrade to a system. If they don't do the upgrade to the system, it takes them longer to do a deployment than their allowable change window is. But they can't do the upgrade to the system without going through regression testing. And it takes them 3 weeks to regression test. And they have to pay an external tester to provide people for 3 weeks before they can roll out a patch. That's just too damn long. So you need automation. It helps you bring everything else together. It's where you get a lot of your efficiencies. So how have we solved this? What have we put in place to build this kind of end-to-end, low-cost, rapid, integrated solution environment? Well, it starts with AWS. It solves the infrastructure problem. They lead by a country mile. I mean, these guys buy disk space by the production run, not just by the container, and not just by a dispatch. They literally get an entire production run of disk space. That's the kind of scale. And what's great about them is because they're a global company and they have so many clients, they are compliant to pretty much any standard you might want to come up with. So they're best of breed against any single standard. That's more than any individual organization is ever going to do. And you've got it for free because they've already done it. So security, they've got it covered. Availability, scalability, they've got it covered. So it's a brilliant choice for an infrastructure as a service, and they're an RXP partner and have been for a while. Service virtualization, CA Lisa. Now, I wasn't likely to suggest another service virtualization product while I'm on the CA Expo stage, but I haven't just said Lisa service virtualization because they're providing us a free lunch. It's because in my former life in Telecom New Zealand, I actually spent quite some time doing proof of concepts, checking the 3 major vendors. I won't mention the other 2 major service virtualization vendors in case any of them are sort of in the room sneakily pretending to be clients. But Lisa won hands down. A lot of it was to do with the great partnership that CA brings and the skilled resources, but it's actually a very easy to adopt platform. It's very well supported. They've been the lead for quite some time, so they've integrated Lisa really, really well. So we chose that. It was so successful within the integration space. Telecom's just doing a major transformation program. I left just after the first release. It was so successful within the integration domain that they then subsequently delivered it for the whole of their systems integration testing. So everything now is going to be covered using Lisa. It was that successful. What next? Well, if you want an integration platform as a service and you want to be able to support hybrid integration, a really good choice, it's not the only choice, but a really good choice, and one that we've worked with quite closely, is Mule. Mule has a cloud-based offering. They support API development really, really well. They've got really good toolkits. They've been focused on the API economy for longer than most of the other integration platform providers have. They've been up on the cloud longer than most of the other integration platform providers have. In fact, several of the other integration providers aren't quite there yet. The deployments are able to be done to on-premise and off-premise in exactly the same way. So again, it's an efficient way of doing it. And they provide huge connectivity to existing software as a service vendors. They have a whole bunch of connector toolkits. So all of those kind of guys that you are going to be wanting to talk to, your Salesforces, your FedEx, there's a lot of support for all of those already. Sitting on top, Lisa release automation. Again, ease of adoption, completeness of the solution. Another one, single throat to choke. Anyone heard that phrase, single throat to choke? It's quite nice to actually work with a single vendor who can give you an end-to-end solution stack. You get economies of scale, but actually the cost of adoption is pretty small these days. But what you get is the ability to actually go to a person, know that they have a product life cycle. There is a roadmap for their product. You don't have to work out by going to 5 or 6 different forums how to make your 3 different open source products work. Now, open source is free at the point of sale, but it's the maintenance costs that kill you. It's free like a puppy's free. So what are we offering? I've got a nice graph here. It's a bit like Gerd's graph, not quite as good because it's not quite as exponential and not quite as pretty. But what I'm trying to show here is that we're not just delivering DevOps as a service here. We're actually applying service-oriented architecture thinking to DevOps as a service. So as an integration person, reuse is something that's close to my heart, and maximizing that and minimizing having to do things twice. I'm easily bored. I hate to do the same thing twice. Ask my wife. So what we do is once we build a set of services for you, and we build a set of supporting APIs, and we build a supporting set of test assets, we'll actually store that repository. And more than that, as other clients come along and we build service components and supporting tests for those standard software as a service offerings, they will become part of the RXP repository. Now, obviously, anything that's bespoke and custom to a particular client would be theirs and proprietary. But template implementations and all back-end mappings to traditional software as a service APIs, they will become part of our standard repository. So over time, any client who's working with us in a partnership will get more and more access to this. That means that if you want to try something, not only can we spin up a DevOps as a service offering quickly, but we'll be able to actually spin up a whole set of existing test assets and service implementations so that you can try things. So you can focus just on the bit that differentiates your business at the front end, at the business process side, because all of the other stuff's already done for you. So does that meet your requirement, Grant?
Well, it's certainly a good approach. Taking a look at this graph and taking it from the business perspective as well. So we talked about the technical and the RXP offering. Taking a look at this graph, what we'd be talking about is the value that this approach brings to your organization. So if you were to be using that with us, not only do you get the additional things that we may develop over time, that additional IP, that way of working, that integration skill, but your own systems will be starting to get mapped out. Your own services will start getting mapped out. And every time you spin up a new environment, which brings us back to that iPhone app that we were talking about earlier, each time you spin up your environment, you're getting greater benefit of that every time. When you start that new environment, you can run your automated tests over the top of those virtualized systems and understand that right at that point in time, you've got a proven environment. You've got one that works. You've got one that illustrates all of the systems that are in your environment that you can then use those services that we brought up in our earlier example, build the couple that you might need to make the application work, and go forward. You don't have to think about the past. You've learnt it, you've established it, now use it. So you're reusing your own IP, not just what we're developing or our thought processes or your thought processes, but you're reutilizing it, you're capitalizing it again and again and again. And I think you'd see a similar graph in that type of approach moving forward as well. So what we're again, trying to remember is DevOps as a service. So to take these concepts around environment provision, licensing, data, system configuration, and interaction, and take all of those things that make you go, oh, I don't really want to touch it, and reduce it down to a thought process that says, I don't need to think about it. I just need to use it. You need to take it from months to weeks to minutes. And it's available now. It's supported in Australia. AWS starts in Australia. MuleSoft Cloud Hub's in Australia. Our own private cloud, should we choose to use that with you as well, is in Australia. It's all Australian-based. There are 3 levels of DevOps as a service from our perspective. So there's service virtualization on AWS. So that's, we've got our pre-configured CA Lisa environment set up, ready for you to potentially have to open up a firewall to connect to. But once you've done that, the environment's ready, it's set up. It takes 5 minutes, I think it's the demo today. It takes about 5 minutes to start up. Probably your firewall rule change takes 8 weeks, but it takes 5 minutes to start up and connect, and from that point in time, you can start virtualizing your environment. Start capitalizing on the data, using what Mark was mentioning before around Pathfinder, around correct data sets at that particular point in time. You don't have to guess, you just have to use it. Building it into integration platforms. So we've started hooking it up with Mule. Other platforms, such as ones that we're involved in, and open source technologies, we'll start virtualizing those as well so that you can start connecting up in the cloud, potentially on-premise as well, if that's where it needs to go. And then building on top of that, release automation, code automation, SVN, code repository management, connected into all of it, which would probably be that longer-term strategic view that we were talking about. It's not just about plonking a product into your environment and hoping it all works. It's about saying, well, where do you want to be in 6 months, 12 months, 24 months' time, and heading in that direction. So our stand is just outside this room. Jim Callahan is here as well, who Mark was referring to by title before as the subject matter expert for the implementation at Super Partners. So if you wanted to link the two together, you could definitely talk to Jim. He'd be happy to talk to you about it. Craig and I will be there as well. And We really would like to thank you for your time and your attention today. And when you see that app get launched, get on it. Thanks.